what on earth would make 70,000 people stand together in a muddy field in a total downpour, all just staring up at the sky? Today, we're diving into a story of prophecies, secrets, and a miracle that captivated the world, starting over a century ago in the small town of Fatima, Portugal. Everything really comes to a head on one specific day, October 13th, 1917. Now keep in mind, World War I is tearing Europe apart, and in this tiny rural village, something completely unexpected is about to go down. And we're not talking about a small group here. A massive crowd had gathered. Some people say it was 50,000, others claim it was up to 100,000, but the number you hear most often is around 70,000 people. You had believers, skeptics, reporters, you name it, they were there. And let me tell you, the conditions were just miserable. They were all standing in this field, the Cova da Iria, completely drenched by a cold rain that had been coming down for hours. The whole place was just a sea of mud. But even with the cold and all that mud, this entire crowd was looking up, waiting for a miracle they'd been promised. So what brought them all there? And what did they see? Well, to really get what happened, we have to rewind and go back to the very beginning. To understand that rainy October day, we actually have to go back a whole year earlier. You see, the main event was really set up by a series of earlier encounters, kind of meant to prepare the way. This whole story centers on 3 young shepherd kids from a village near Fatima. There was 10-year-old Lucia dos Santos and her younger cousins, 9-year-old Francisco and 7-year-old Jacinta Marto. So in the spring of 1916, the children started saying that an angel had appeared to them, calling himself the Angel of Peace. He supposedly showed up 2 more times that year, teaching them special prayers and getting them ready for a divine message. So a year goes by, and the children believe they're prepared. And in the spring of 1917, the angel's visits give way to, well, a much more significant visitor. On May 13th, while they were out with their sheep, the kids saw a flash of light. A lady appeared over a small oak tree. Lucia later said she was more brilliant than the sun, and she asked them to come back to that same spot on the 13th of every month for the next 6 months. Now, Lucia was the only one who spoke directly with the lady. In that first chat, the lady told them all 3 kids would go to heaven, but she also said that Francisco and Jacinta would be taken soon. Her main request was for them to pray the rosary every day for peace and for the war to end. And you can bet that word of these apparitions spread like absolute wildfire. The crowds just exploded with each visit. It went from just a few dozen locals in June to thousands by July, and then, by September, you had tens of thousands of people making the trip to the Cova da Iria. But you know, all this fame brought some serious trouble. Portugal at the time was run by a government that was, let's just say, not a fan of the church. The local administrators saw this whole thing as a public disturbance, a challenge to his authority. So in August, he actually kidnapped the children. He threw them in jail and even threatened to boil them in oil if they didn't admit it was all a lie. But they wouldn't say a word. But it was during the July apparition that things got really intense. The lady entrusted the children with a secret message for the world, and this message was divided into 3 distinct parts. This would become the famous and super controversial 3 Secrets of Fatima. This 3-part secret was filled with prophecies and some pretty dire warnings. Lucia would reveal the first 2 parts in 1941, but the third one, that would be kept under lock and key by the Vatican for decades, fueling all kinds of speculation. Okay, so the first secret was a flat-out, horrifying vision of hell. Lucia described seeing this huge sea of fire, filled with shrieking demons and tortured souls that looked human. The lady explained that she was showing them this to let them see where poor sinners go and to get them to pray for their souls. Then you have the second secret, which was a very direct prophecy. It said World War I would end soon, but if people didn't change their ways, an even worse war would break out. It also warned that Russia would spread its errors all over the world, causing more wars and persecutions unless it was consecrated to her immaculate heart. And that brings us to the most mysterious piece of the puzzle, the third secret. Lucia wrote it down in 1944, and it was sealed away. The vision was of a bishop dressed in white walking through a ruined city full of dead bodies. He climbs a mountain and is then killed by soldiers at the foot of a big cross. So yeah, the secrets were pretty heavy. But the lady had also made a promise. a promise of a public sign that would happen during her very last appearance. She had promised the children that come October, she would perform a huge miracle so that all may believe. This promise is exactly what brought that enormous crowd we saw at the beginning. They were all there waiting for proof. And that's why, on October 13th, all those eyes, all 70,000 pairs of them, were glued to 3 little kids standing in the rain, waiting for that promise to be kept. And then, after the lady's final message, Lucia shouts, "Look at the sun." And according to dozens and dozens of accounts, the rain just stopped, the clouds ripped apart, the sun appeared, but it looked like a spinning silver disc, and it started casting these incredible colors, yellow, blue, purple, all over everything. Then it looked like it detached from the sky and started plunging toward the terrified crowd in a zigzag pattern. This went on for about 10 minutes, and then it just went back to its normal place. And here's the kicker. People reported that their soaking wet clothes were suddenly completely dry. So the miracle of the sun might have been the end of the apparitions, but it was really just the beginning of Fatima's impact on the entire world. And sure enough, the prophecies started to come true. Just like the lady had said, Francisco and Jacinta died shortly after in the flu pandemic. Then, in 1930, the church made it official, saying the visions were worthy of belief. Fast forward to May 13th, 1981, the anniversary of the very first apparition, and Pope John Paul II is shot. He was convinced that the bishop in white was a vision of all the suffering popes of the 20th century, culminating in the attempt on his own life, and that Our Lady of Fátima had saved him. The Vatican basically confirmed this idea when they finally released The Secret in 2000.